Hello, dear viewers. Sect, cult. I'm sure you've come across these derogatory labels in society, and you probably use it too. But have you ever thought about who is behind this label? Who has the power to attach this label and brand various groups, communities, and even business organizations in this way? Have you ever wondered what happens to those who receive this label? In his video, Egon Shalakian revealed that this label was introduced into society by anti-cult organizations. They do it in a very subtle way, and we looked into it and uncovered shocking information, which we will share with you today. One key tactic used by these anti-cult organizations, or rather the way they operate, is by infiltrating the targeted organizations they label as cults or sects. They undermine these groups from within, recruiting their members from inside the organization which they targeted.
Yes, we encountered this kind of behavior in Alatra as well. Basically, they insert narratives into the media, and they've actually infected, subliminally conditioned certain individuals. These individuals either join our organization directly as agents, whether it's Alatra or the Creative Society, or they bring in narratives that cast doubt among participants. We've discovered this in our work chats or during international calls. What is more, recordings of the international calls have appeared on social networks, yet we are just ordinary volunteers. All we do is inform people about the increasing climate change. For example, on April 24th, we held a presentation in Vienna titled Ways to Solve the Climate Crisis, which we organized jointly as participants of the Creative Society from Austria, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, which is part of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. We raised the issue of the severity of escalating climate disasters. We discussed the latest technologies that could be implemented around the world to help overcome the climate crisis, and we emphasized the importance of raising awareness about this topic. And on the other side, there are anti-cult organizations. So what do? They engage in terrorism. But we will probably discuss that further.
But it's about having a responsible attitude as citizens of this planet, because we are acting in accordance with the UN Declaration. We are responsibly addressing what is happening in society. We see that something is not right, so we actively and responsibly raise awareness about it. This is how we cooperate with the UN, because we fulfill the idea that...
And we have the right to do so.
It is our right, that's the point. And precisely due to this effort to undermine us from within and to destroy us as well as what we actually do, specific opinions are beginning to emerge. There are insinuations being spread such as that Alatra is no longer what it used to be and that the Creative Society is not the same, especially now after the release of the video with Egon Shalakian. But perhaps right now it's as important as ever to emphasize that Alatra remains as it was, and so does the Creative Society project. The project remains completely the same. The point is that we do not see directly the operations of the anti-cult movement. We only see the results. And because we are a worldwide movement, we see how we are starting to face problems all over the world. In some countries, we have even been banned.
Yes.
And we see how our participants are basically being prosecuted and how they are suffering. And one of the main reasons we've gathered here today is that we were inspired by how the participants have dealt with everything that the anti-cults have been pouring at us for 10 years. Inspired by how they did not give up, how they held and carried the Alatra flag, we are now inspired to help hold it as well. It is a great honor to have the opportunity
to speak on their behalf.
To speak on their behalf today and to talk about what is really happening, the injustices being done, and not only to us, for this is the issue that concerns the entire society. We want to show how other groups are suffering, how terribly they are suffering, and where this can lead.
Yes, we've only uncovered the tip of the iceberg so far. But the whole underlying network, when we look at other organizations where the activity of anti-cult organizations has reached a terrible scale, to the point of actual genocide. We will talk more about it later. But we were able to uncover it all thanks to Egon Sholakian, who brought this problem to our attention. And we could start by saying that under the video with Egon Sholakian, people left many different comments. We've already organized the first roundtable, and after a day, there were many comments where people simply misunderstood or conflated things. For instance, when Egon Sholakian called the dark force trying to destabilize the whole world, and even Russia itself, and he referred to it as the KGB, many people automatically assumed we were against Russia, against the Russian Federation and its president. We want to clarify here that we are not against Russia, we are not against the Russian president. We are simply naming the organization aloud, which is trying to destabilize the entire democratic world, including Russia, and is acting against Russia. It is also acting against our participants in the Russian Federation.
And not just them.
And not just them, but the whole world. This is actually a shadow organization made up of people without a homeland, who perhaps have no democratic values. Their only goal is to destabilize the world, and they fight only for their own benefit. So we are on the side of the people. We are on the side of all organizations and all people on the planet, including the United States, including Russia, including Europe, including China. We have simply exposed this dark force, this hydra that is basically working underhand.
And it wants to establish a totalitarian system.
Yes, a totalitarian system. And we can all fall victim to it if we do not start taking action.
It's interesting, though. These anti-cult movements started very subtly, very gradually. In the US, when people began to turn away from traditional churches and started seeking out other groups, there were groups of people or individuals who didn't understand how it was possible for someone to leave a traditional church. This led to the belief that these people must have had their brains washed, and from that came the need to kind of rescue people from these groups, meaning to help them.
Maybe it was just fear from some of the family members, not knowing what was happening to the person.
Of course, there are various groups. I'm not saying that all of these groups are safe, of course, but the percentage of some sort of extreme behavior is usually quite low. However, what first started as help and what later formed into the anti-cult movement essentially used extremely violent techniques. They would forcibly abduct these members, torturing them. They would attempt to deprogram them like their minds have been clouded. And what surprised me greatly was discovering that there actually exists a field of science called the sociology of religion, which studies anti-cult movements and their practices. It's clearly stated there that these deprogramming practices border on criminal activity because they involve torture, rape, other abuses,
forcible separation from families, physical punishments,
and confinement in apartments, sometimes done even by family members.
Against the person's will.
Against the person's will. It was a complete violation of basic human rights. I would say that the behavior of anti-cult movements is very, well, over time it became apparent that...
That's a dehumanization, basically.
Ultimately, yes. The way you treat someone when you deny their basic rights, when you treat them worse than an animal, is a form of dehumanization. Anti-cult movements started to emerge in the US and then spread to Europe. They eventually realized that deprogramming is actually not quite normal.
Because many scientists and many experts raised concerns.
Yeah, so now you may encounter opinions, for example, in our region, whether in the Czech Republic or Slovakia, that anti-cult movements have sort of prudently withdrawn from deprogramming and distanced themselves from it.
Yes, they've distanced themselves from it.
So instead, nowadays, it is called exit counseling. But in reality, when you study it in depth, they've merely renamed it. Perhaps they've eliminated some extreme practices, but deprogramming continues in a different form. Especially when you look at the leaders of anti-cult movements, you'll see that they are directly linked to the founding members and the core ideas of deprogramming. Agard, for instance, was involved, and many others like him. So local experts basically refer to them. There is a direct connection, and it's impossible to completely avoid that link.
Yeah, on the one hand, they refer to them, but then, on the other hand, they say they don't actually use their practices. They say, this is my teacher, this is the person who inspired me. But at the same time, they deny what he said should be done, saying they are not doing it. So, you see, there is a huge contradiction here.
You were talking about denial, and a lot of specialists often note that those who very loudly deny doing something, this is the sign that they are actually the ones who are most likely to continue doing it.
That's how it usually goes. For instance, genocides. I mean, it is said that if somebody denies that a genocide actually exists, there is a very high probability that it exists.
That it does exist.
That they'll keep doing it.
Okay, let me sum it up, because we've jumped right into the topic, and I'm not sure if the audience gets it now. We said at the beginning that there is a dark force, and its extended hand acting in its interest in this world is anti-cult organizations. And the practices these anti-cult organizations use, we are going to name those organizations as well, the main ones. So, the tool they are using is deprogramming. Deprogramming, right, which you've already mentioned. So basically, they are interconnected.
Exactly, because the majority of the general public actually learns about cults through anti-cult movements. Yeah, it's actually the anti-cult movement that starts labeling and marking a group, saying, look. And even if they don't directly use the term cult or sect, they might use something like, because cult or sect has a very negative connotation.
The word.
Yes, the word. And it works the same way in our country as well as in other post-communist countries. I mean, the word sect is more common in our region, while in the Western world, it's the term cult. When the word cult is used there, it's essentially the same as using our word sect. What's also very specific is that they do not just label a group, urging people to be wary of it, but to make it sound more acceptable, they might call it a new religious movement. The way they study such a group is through those who left this very group, which is actually one of the features of deprogramming and exit counseling. So the person who leaves that group for whatever reason becomes the only source of information presented to the public. Moreover, anti-cult organizations do not communicate with the group itself to get an objective view. And what's actually interesting about exit counseling is that there is this classic scheme. A person leaving such a group typically goes through 5 stages. In the first stage, this person completely discredits the authority of the leader or founder of the group. Then he starts to experience some kind of a conflict between the ideology within the group and the reality outside, which leads to a fundamental clash. And most importantly, we see an attempt to point out issues like the leaders themselves don't actually do what they say others should. So there is some contradiction here. Here we found a good example, for instance. How can a leader preach love to people while exploiting others? So things like that are put in contrast here. Then there comes a breaking point where the person who's leaving the group starts listening to the deprogrammer, the one who is actually doing the exit counseling. And the person starts to actually care more about the reality than the ideology. And then There is the fourth stage, self-expression. It means that the person starts to sort of open up.
Discontentment begins.
And he starts to express dissatisfaction with that particular organization, talking about what is not okay there. He starts pointing out all the negatives from his perspective. And then there is the fifth stage, which is the identification and the transfer of their personality, where the person starts to identify with the personality of the deprogrammer or the exit counselor. He begins to see himself as an opponent of the cult, not as a member. That is, he takes a stance and becomes an opponent of this group. And this is actually something we observe in the media space.
And it's happening. It's happening to us as well.
It's happening to us as well. We've noticed it with various groups that have been labeled as cults. No one cares about what these groups contribute to society. No one cares about what's positive about them, what benefits they bring or how they live. Most of the time, there is always some, just like you said. There is always a former member who went through a program of, as you said,
Deprogramming.
goes through deprogramming. There is a nice way to call it, exit counseling. And on the one hand, this person might not even want to do harm. Maybe he just wants to live peacefully. But when an anti-cult organization, which aims to dismantle and label a particular group, finds such a person, it can exploit them under the guise of doing good. And the person starts acting against.
And that person may not even be aware of
He
it.
may not even know, but he starts acting against the group.
These forms of manipulation actually became so sophisticated that nowadays it doesn't even have to. Nowadays, in certain countries, it no longer has to involve physical violence. Although I've read about what's happening in Japan, well, those are really, really harsh things. But the way a leaving member turns against the group can be baffling, and we see this happening.
We can also see it happening in our organization. And we are going to actually talk about other organizations where it's happening as well. Because that discrediting is just, the goal is to give that organization that stigma, and most importantly, to ensure that public opinion condemns it. Because if some organization, some anti-cult movement labels you as a cult, nothing significant really happens yet. There has to be a turning point in the public opinion as well. That public opinion needs to be formed, and for that, they use the media and journalists. Basically, this is just all the theory we have studied, and it works, and the scheme is still the same. We can also look at specific cases of how this happens, because we've prepared cases about 2 organizations where everybody will recognize, and
I'd like to point out that the stigmatization is happening right now. Let's just look at how it's being done. Basically, what we do within the Allatra movement or the Creative Society project is monitor climate change. We are 3 mothers. Each one of us has children. And, when we delve into that topic, many of us have been watching every single night for a few years now, watching everything, seeing that the climate problem is exacerbating. We simply can't ignore it. So, this woman, let's take a family, for example. This mom has basically tapped into that topic and is actually trying to help. She's gathering information, she's helping the project, and her husband or partner, I don't want to speak about a specific gender, but basically the other partner doesn't see it the same way. And
he sees the articles.
He sees the articles. That's what I'm saying, that he's actually picked up on those narratives of anti-cult organizations in the media, and he's not optimally attuned in some way, because clearly that mom obviously spends a lot of
time in the evenings, but she just does it with a mindset that she's doing it for the future of herself and her children. And the man also happens to be drinking, and there have been cases where he basically started to, first of all, berate the woman, and then it ended up in a fight, and the family really started to fall apart. But those anti-cult organizations, what did they do again? They took advantage of that and started putting that in as a narrative. Allatra breaks up families, the Creative Society breaks up families, and yet the only thing that started breaking up the family was the narratives that they put in the media, and simply people who, for whatever reason, didn't have enough time to understand. Maybe they just don't understand yet. They just took over those narratives and started to sort of break up families, but it's not because of Allatra. It's the narratives of these anti-cult organizations.
We've basically each experienced that ourselves, that when we became members, and so we are active members of the Alatra International Public Movement, and there are people in our neighborhood who are not members, and we've encountered that. Just anybody.
On social media.
Yes, on social media.
For example, it happened to me recently. I have a friend from college, we haven't seen each other in 25 years, and I basically just shared a video with Egon Chalakian, and he totally, disparagingly wrote in saying what a stupid, half-witted, crazy cult stupidity I'm sharing. And I thought about it, and then I replied to him saying, listen, you haven't seen me for 25 years. You absolutely don't know what I've been through. And on what basis do you draw that picture of me? You're just reading about the image of us that the media has formed, and you are simply evaluating this image. You're not evaluating me. You're evaluating the image that has been created for you by people who do evil.
Yes.
And that's happening to you too, I think.
Yeah, or is it that basically people have known us for a very long time since we were very young? We know those values that our parents raised us with. They're simply there. We are a person, and all of a sudden one reads some narrative in the media, and now actually those relatives or those friends feel the need to categorize us. Well, she's already like that. Without a person calling, asking, what's going on in your life? Why do you actually support, for example, the Creative Society? Why do you support Alatra? No, just the topic gets shut down, and it is very dangerous. Realize, dear viewers, how very dangerous it is for a person to believe these narratives, how it tears apart friendships, how it tears apart family, how it tears apart society, that we no longer communicate with each other, we no longer care why the other person is doing it. But by somebody getting a tag, or how do you say, the label of being a member of a cult, by that point, the person just kind of loses their value to us. They are like, I don't even know what to say.
And that's absolutely surprising to me, is how powerful that label of
Yes.
cult is, that it can actually trump that moment that a person reads that it's a cult, and it beats picking up that phone and making that phone call. Hey, Bashi, please, I read some article. Please, can you tell me something about it? And yet we have a lot of experience with the media presenting a picture in a certain way
They all say that.
that doesn't match reality.
Yes.
But through all of that, for example, the word sect here has such power that we take it as a done deal, because the fear that it actually creates in us, the caution, is too great, far too great. Well, let's look further today at what it actually is, how it actually happened.
Yeah, we also have one in particular. To give you specific examples, well, it happened to us, but we also have one participant who actually came here from a country where there is an ongoing war. He came to a country where he was seeking refuge. He was given refuge by our country, and this man will tell us about it himself. We are very happy that he will tell us his story. This man will tell us exactly why he is in trouble. For example, in finding a job, by being a member of the Alatra International Public Movement.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for your invitation. My name is Dr. Konstantin Rybachuk. I'm PhD Associate Professor. I'm a specialist in comparative education systems. I come from the Ukraine, and I'm participant of the International Public Movement Alatra. I live and work right now in Slovakia. I have survived with my family in Bucha under the bombs and shells when the war began. And thanks God, my family and I are still alive, and we were able to move out of the country and find shelter in a beautiful country called Slovakia. I'm a participant of the International Public Movement Alatra from the very beginning, and I faced in the Ukraine a lot of situations when I was persecuted and accused for being a member of the sect, stigmatized by people, by social media. A lot of friends who used to be my friends for many years refused after that communicating with me, but still that did not stop me. Because I wish people knew that Alatra actually is science, very deep, very fundamental, and very unique in many senses science. However, the problem that I have faced, for example, in the Ukraine, that people were not trying to get to know more about what the actually international public movement Allatra, and that it is actually a unification of absolutely honest and most beautiful people who are on volunteering basis trying to make this world a better place for living for everyone. But unfortunately, because of fake media, fake journalists who have sold their professionalism, who have sold their human dignity for 30 silver coins, accused me and other participants of the international public movement Allatra that we were members of some kind of sect or cult. And unfortunately, a lot of people believed that because they did not bother themselves to go to the official website, read information that International Public Movement Allatra is not a part of any political organization, is not a part of any religious organization, and unites volunteers, really beautiful and honest volunteers from around the world who are involved in science and especially in the problem of climate change in the world, but accused us to be some cult, some sect, and all other nasty words that they are still using actually against us for many, many years. I had a chance to immigrate with my family to European Union, to Slovakia, to this beautiful country where we have found shelter and protection. However, when I got my first job, and I'd like to say that I'm a highly trained specialist in the field of comparative education systems, and I personally participated in 3 education reforms in different countries. I got a job here. I was hired immediately without, the knowledge of the Slovak language, but my experience was highly valuable. But 2.5 months later, when people learned that I was a member of the International Public Movement Allatra, the CEO invited me for the conversation, and he actually told me that I'm fired, that they have to terminate the contract because of my active participation in the Allatra movement. The same situation repeated in my second job when I was also fired for being a member and participant of the International Public Movement Allatra. I had a chance to have a small conversation with the director of this organization. I told them that this is not a crime. This is just a volunteering movement. And this movement is primarily concerned about the problems that we have right now in the world, especially with the problem of climate. But actually nobody was willing to listen to me. Nobody was willing to understand my position, listen to my opinion, because people have read all those nasty articles and dirt that were published by fake journalists, by these influencers who, from my point of view, are sponsored by only enemies of the democratic society, because they are highly likely trying to pursue their own goals, which are not aligned with any democratic society, with freedom of speech, with human dignity, freedom of choice, wealth of people. So these journalists, from my point of view, are entirely against the democratic society and against human values. 10 minutes later from my second job, I was just, behind, the door already with all my stuff packed. And like I said, nobody was even trying to listen to my, facts. And of course, nobody even bothered themselves also second time to read more and trying to understand more what the International Public Movement Allatra is. But like I said already, if people had a chance actually to go deeper into this question, and I want to emphasize, to do kind of desk study, a small research done by themselves individually, people would realize that Allatra actually is indeed a volunteering movement which is not sponsored by anyone. It is not supported by anyone. That's why it is such an easy organization to be beaten by other people, journalists, those someone who is in power, easily to be beaten, and cannot be protected by anyone, people would understand that Allatra indeed is actually deep, very fundamental, and what most importantly is crucial for the development of our entire human society, science. So Allatra is science. But unfortunately, we are so sometimes careless about the information that we read without trying to recheck ourselves the facts, find proofs. But unfortunately, we also receiving here allegations into our address that we are members of some sect or cult, which is absolutely nonsense and have nothing in common with even common sense, moral logic. But this is how it is. Still, I'm not refusing. I'm still participating because I know that international public movement Allatra is doing everything possible to make this world a beautiful place for living for absolutely every single person, because we are scientists and we believe that we will actually that people one day will understand the importance of Allatra and the importance of checking facts, importance to live with our own understanding based on facts and on the truth. Thank you very much for having me this opportunity to address to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. But it's certainly not just your story. It happens to other participants as well. That's exactly why we are here, to talk about it, so this no longer happens, not just within our organization, but in any other communities, movements, even business organizations that get labeled as a cult.
The label cult works very similar to how Jews were labeled during World War II. Back then it was visible. There was a yellow star and everyone knew from a distance that the person was Jewish. Now, with the rise of social media and the advancement of the information age, we no longer need to put up stars. It's enough to create some public opinion about the Allatra project and the Creative Society project.
To write comments.
And it will spread very quickly.
Yeah.
The moment someone starts talking about the climate and is associated with them, it automatically escalates very quickly. How is this different from what happened during World War II?
People were also afraid to approach those who wore the star. That's exactly what happened.
Like they label it sectarianism, basically.
Organizations are actually distancing themselves from us. How many experiences do we have where someone suddenly turns away?
Yes, we could have conducted.
They can't be associated with us.
It can be the withdrawal of interviews.
We could have done a lot of good, inform a lot of people, many organizations, and before various events. We received messages saying, "We have read various information about you, and we are canceling the reserved event with us."
Even recently, we spoke at a conference. Everything was fine, our speaker was a respected doctor. But in the end, we were asked not to make it public.
Ultimately, when stigmatization and separation occur, people suddenly start looking at such a group as something unusual. And then it continues further. A dehumanization process begins, and people start viewing such a group as less than human. Yet we have plenty of experts and studies that deal with this issue. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo shows in his work that these are propaganda tools used to create the image of an enemy from another group of people. This leads to enormous massacres between two friendly tribes. For example, the massacre in Rwanda. These are deliberately created efforts
Deliberately created.
to introduce hatred and unrest into society, to polarize it. Similarly, Sam Keen has a great book, Faces of the Enemy, about the faces of the enemy during World War II. It shows how to pit such large nations against each other, how to create the image of an enemy and convince the public to form the opinion that these people are not human, that there is something less, and therefore it is okay to treat them as non-humans and be aggressive, violent, and cruel towards them. This way, we begin to encounter various aggressive attitudes in society, and if we're not careful, we often accept it. It's public opinion, and it's okay to do it this way, but it is not okay.
And everyone does it, so I do it too. That's why we are talking about it. Dear viewers, realize how dangerous this is. This narrative is artificially introduced into society by anti-cult organizations because it benefits them. We don't know their motivation at all, and as a society we accept the narrative and start implementing it, leading to division and polarization. We speak from our personal experiences, the experiences of participants in the international public movement *ALLATRA, and many organizations facing this. Suddenly, you find out that you are also labeled as a cult somewhere, and even if you are in a business company. We will discuss this today. It happens because you are not on the right paper, or you even label someone as a cult without knowing why you accepted this. Because someone wanted it. That's why it happens. We can also move on to another group of people who are already stigmatized in this way. The Jehovah's Witnesses. I was very shocked when I found a message on the website of an unnamed village. I will read it. Beware, Jehovah's Witnesses are starting to wander around the village. Girls, how does that sound to you when such a message appears? Previously, I wouldn't have looked at it this way. But after uncovering the activities of Hydra and anti-cult organizations, I look at it like, wow. The message talks as if stray dogs or bears were wandering around the village. But these are people walking around the village. They're absolutely harmless, peaceful, and want to talk about God. Yes, their activity is missionary work. It's part of their duties. Spreading their beliefs is part of their activities. I also read many comments under this post. Many supported this narrative, this negative view. The comments were derogatory. A few people wrote that you should just send them away. When they ring your bell, say you don't have time, you don't want to talk to them, and they will leave. They're polite people. They themselves say, as Jehovah's Witnesses, that they do not campaign for laws that would impose their moral and religious values on others. They say, we are tolerant of others and would like others to be tolerant of us. It is said that it is a religious community, but they have already been labeled a cult worldwide. In many countries, they are banned. Regarding Slovakia, various experts have commented. For example, the Czech expert Lužný directly stated that Jehovah's Witnesses pose no danger to society. In contrast, Ms. Škodová wrote that she had studied this organization for a long time, but because the organization is known worldwide, the cult label is stuck to it, thus supporting the claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. Even among experts there is disharmony. Some say they are a cult, and others say they are not. Interestingly, Jehovah's Witnesses are banned in Russia, although in our country society turns away from them, mocks them, and verbally demeans them. But fortunately, there is no such repression and penalties as in Russia.
Well, but I have an example from Georgia, where they even had to take measures that when they want to meet, 2 or 3 people always have to stand outside the building with a mobile phone.
Even common groups of people are now raiding them, their opponents. They kick in their doors, and one family even had their house burned down, along with their entire library of books.
Just because.
It is just because they think differently. It's just because they study something that's different. For example, over 2 weeks in Georgia, more than 130,000 people signed a petition. There were even Orthodox people among them. Unfortunately, though, there has been no progress in Georgia. Jehovah's Witnesses are still being hunted, precisely through the narrative of anti-cult organizations.
We see that even their accusations are baseless. They accuse them of believing that only they are the chosen ones. Let's consider that I'm a Christian. In every religion, the person believes they are the chosen one. According to people who evaluate who is and isn't a cult, such an argument doesn't hold at all. Another argument is that they don't accept blood transfusions. I understand that for an adult, it's okay. Some find it controversial that parents decide for their child. Of course, parents always have the most responsibility for their child. They also criticize Jehovah's Witnesses for refusing military service. Even the early Christians refused military service. It contradicts the original teachings of returning to Russia. Jehovah's Witnesses are recognized as extremists there, and there is a specific instruction for law enforcement on how to deal with extremists. These people, as you mentioned, invade their homes, burn them down, and confiscate their property. They face imprisonment for over 10 years.
Katka, they actually burn people alive.
They burn people, they beat them, they use physical punishment on them. That's stigmatizing a person for their beliefs. It's dangerous that with dehumanization, like you said, you get a label put on you. You stop being a human being.
You don't even have a way to defend yourself because Jehovah's Witnesses back in World War II, when they were going into concentration camps, they were also given special labels, purple triangles to wear. Jehovah's Witnesses have had it rough in this for 100 years. Consider that they are the 6th largest religious group in Slovakia. It's a big group. And when it gets that label, realistically, it has no way to defend itself. Once a person gets the label, that's it. On whose behest does the media keep monitoring this over the years?
And we know who is behind it.
On whose behest, when, and how?
Why is that narrative still perpetuated in society? They can do a lot of good, but nobody is broadcasting it. We know that from our own experience. In which mainstream news, in which mainstream media outlets did they put our conferences?
While those narratives, they get out there very quickly.
The narrative that we are a sect,
Extremist sect.
just like the Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia have been labeled, has made it to mainstream television. That is the sequence that we are now revealing here. It starts innocently. There is some organization or some group of people that society is negatively disposed towards, and they do a report. They put in one sentence that is completely out of place, and the reader, when he reads it, is surprised what that sentence is doing there. They put in a name, for example, of our organization, Alatra, the Creative Society, which is obviously not related at all. But one makes the connection. They add another narrative that we are becoming too visible, too dangerous, and it comes to the point where we are labeled extremists. In that way, that label or that designation is already saying that law enforcement can step in.
But they've gotten to the point that in many countries the real word sect or cult equals non-human, non-people, and we can't treat them that way. By stigmatizing us, they point the finger at us. That is the worst thing, that it is not they who do the evil, but they provoke some people to do the evil for them. It is by branding people.
But it doesn't stop there. That's not the end of what can happen to you. If you get labeled a sect, they can ban you, or they can declare you extremist.
It's much worse.
It is much worse. This goes all the way to genocide of a group. Let's move on now to the next group that we found out more information about.
Well, when we were preparing, we understood that it's not a well-known group.
I didn't know about it. I didn't understand.
You know, let's ask the audience if they knew about the Falun Gong group.
Yes, Falun Gong or Falun Dafa. There are more of those names, but in our country, Falun Gong is the most used. It's a very peaceful group and it's developing as a form of spiritual practice. It's a combination of spiritual practices, Qigong practice, and basically a Buddhist path of truth, reconciliation, love and understanding. It was actually a consequence of when Qigong was developing a lot in China in the 90s, and around 1992, it was at its peak in China. And right now, I'm specifically talking about China. And basically, in 1992, the spiritual, absolutely peaceful community was established. It started to gain momentum, and around 1995, it has gained so many participants that it was roughly equal to the Communist Party in China. They began to get voices and were asked to start creating branches of the Communist Party within their communities.
From the government side.
From the government side, yes. They were still like a state institution back then. It's just that the founder didn't agree to it. He just assessed that it went against the principles that they profess, and so they sort of left those state structures. And that's where the big problem came in. They started these sort of intermittent arrests that culminated in about 1999, when there was a big peaceful gathering of people, where they wanted to express their disagreement with it. But they basically got a promise that it would all be resolved. And as they peacefully dispersed, from that year onwards, the great persecution of all Falun Gong supporters began. What happened? Well, a special office was created. It was called the 610 office, and they started using what we all know anti-cult organizations use: the media, the police, the military, and even the education system. And they started literally hunting down these participants, and not only did they start arresting them, but worst of all, they started sending them to labor camps. They were in those labor camps for the longest time in the worst conditions, and it ended up with the removal of organs.
You know what's the most shocking part of this? As these labor camps have started in China, parallel to that, a huge boom in transplant medicine is starting. And the problem is that when we look at the statistics, the number of organ donors is not going up. Nothing's changed. Through it all, there are living organs that are suitable for transplantation.
And where do they come from?
Where does it come from? Also, among scientists, it is a very controversial question. From what we found out next, I cannot sleep at night.
That all of a sudden China has become the top in organ transplantation. When you consider that in Europe you wait 3 to 5 years for a certain organ, in China you wait 3 to 5 days.
We have found a number of eyewitnesses who talk about this. We have found a number of experts, also a number of associations that are pointing this out.
It's not a secret.
It's not a secret. All the information that we are telling you now is horrible. This is the first we've heard of it, And it's unimaginable that such a thing could happen in our democratic society. Now you see the power of the octopus, how it is advancing and what its goal is. We are realizing whether we are really all safe if we do not stop this evil.
And whether we want to get this far.
Whether we want to reach this
point.
You can't even reproduce that. I'll read you one testimony that we found. It's from publicly available sources. We didn't make any of this up. We read eyewitness testimony in the Bloody Harvest report about the torture of a high school teacher. Witness. We had interrogated her and brutally tortured her for a week already. Her body was covered in countless wounds and scars. We had shocked her with stun guns, stunned her. She had been out of her wits. And then, I wasn't sure who, maybe some office at the Public Security Bureau of Liaoning Province. Anyway, it was a very secretive office. They sent two people. One was a military doctor from the General Hospital of Shenyang Military Command, PLA. One was a graduate of the Second Military Medical University. Basically, one was more elderly, and the other one was young. Basically, she was sent to an operating room at a psychiatric hospital, and a set of procedures were performed on her. They did not administer any anesthesia to her. They held the scalpel by her chest. Their hands did not tremble at all. If it were me, I would have trembled for sure. I might have served in the armed police force. I carried a gun, and I participated in military exercises with real ammo. And I've seen lots of dead bodies, but when I saw those military doctors, I had to give it to them. Their hands did not tremble at all. They just pulled up their masks and the gurney was pulled close. We each held a gun and stood to the side, guarding. They had already cut into her. She screamed and said, "Falun Dafa is good." She said, "You can kill me." Basically, the witness continued. She meant, "You can kill me, but can you kill hundreds of millions of us? People who are being persecuted for believing in a true faith?" At that moment, the military doctors hesitated. They shot me a glance, and then shot our senior official a glance, and the official nodded. He continued with the blood vessel. First was the extraction of the heart, and then the extraction of the kidneys. When the scissors cut into a blood vessel in the heart, she began convulsing. It was extremely terrifying.
Just look at how far it has gone. I encourage anyone who still doubts whether it is true to read this report. It's publicly available. It's called Bloody Harvest. It's from Kilgore and Matus. And you know, it has other implications as well. Society has been all but destroyed with those narratives. There's testimony of undercover people who randomly, just imagine, randomly called into clinics. I'll tell you about some examples. For instance, they called the clinic doctor to see if they had kidneys available. At first, he said not really. But when he asked for very high-quality kidneys and heard that the people from Falun Gong movement had very high-quality kidneys, the doctor cautiously answered, "We have the best quality." They started asking, how is it possible that their kidneys, liver, heart, retinas are of the best quality? And then the doctor replied, "It is confirmed by the way they live. They are of the highest quality." And what he added then was the worst. He said, "We know this because they are taken from bodies that are still breathing. Their hearts are still beating." He also pointed out that there are selected hospitals that have access to universities, to some state organizations, and they have a kidney, a liver, a heart, whatever, available right away. He even said, bring in money and in a few days you have a new kidney. No problem, just come, bring the money and you will have a healthy organ.
The fact that this is publicly available information, so the professional public is also dealing with this. We have read that in 2006 there were allegations that a large number of Falun Gong practitioners were killed for organs for the Chinese transplant industry. A preliminary investigation found that the sources of the 41,500 organs donated over a 6-year period from 2000 to 2005 are unknown. And it was concluded that the large-scale harvesting of organs from Falun Gong practitioners continues to this day. Between 2000 and 2008, an estimated 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners were killed for their organs. In 2008, the UN Special Rapporteurs again demanded that the Chinese government explain the allegations of the harvesting of vital organs from Falun Gong practitioners and report on the sources of organs used in the transplant industry, which has continued to grow rapidly in China since 2000.
Here is a very important point. We didn't know about this, but it's information that is known around the world. The UN knows about it, various groups know about it. There are protests around the world to stop this activity in China. Although the Chinese government has promised to investigate the situation, nothing is being done about it. It still suits them that there is fear in the population.
I would like to correct the information that you said that while in Europe it takes 3 to 5 years to get an organ, in China it's a matter of days. It is correct that in Europe the wait is 3 to 5 months.
Oh, sorry.
We've gotten to this point as humanity in China because at some point Falun Gong was labeled as a cult. When we look at it, there came a certain point when this organization, this group of people, was labeled as a cult, and that has been exploited. This international term, cult, was used to justify this kind of practice and this kind of brutality against people.
Yes, because once you are labeled a cult, dehumanization of the individual immediately begins. And according to these organizations, the labeled person is not human and can be used for anything.
They can be imprisoned or even killed.
Yes, they can be killed, and this happened thanks to
these narratives in this whole series.
And we can easily argue that, yes, we mention the Russian Federation and China, where many viewers might say, well, those are definitely not democratic countries, and we cannot talk about it this way because we all know that human rights are denied in these countries. So let's ask ourselves, who is really behind this? How did it happen?
You asked the right question. We talked about Jehovah's Witnesses being persecuted and labeled as an extremist organization in Russia, as well as Falun Gong, who are persecuted and killed in China. One might ask, well, these are undemocratic countries, and it's, I don't want to say normal, but it's generally known that these countries do not respect human rights and freedoms. But here, in European countries and the European Union, something similar cannot happen. Basically, until we delved deeper in the research of this whole issue and until Egon Shalakian alerted us to the anti-cult organizations, we might have thought the same. But we discovered very interesting information that actually connects to our lives and to Europe. And now we come to two anti-cult organizations, FECRIS which is the European Federation of Centers for Research and Information on Sectarianism, based in France and founded under French law, and RACIRS, the Russian Association of Centers for the Study of Religions and Sects, which also acts as an advocate for the Russian Orthodox Church. Interestingly, in 1993, this Russian organization was first established, and in the same year, the Organization for the Study of Sects and New Religious Movements was founded in the Czech Republic, and a year later, a similar organization was established in France. The French organization, as we can read on their public website, serves as an umbrella organization for associations that advocate for victims of cult excesses. It is present in more than 30 countries, 5 of which are non-European. We looked at those countries and we didn't find Slovakia or the Czech Republic listed, but the connections are still evident. We also read that although this organization may not have a branch in a given country, it doesn't mean it doesn't operate there, as it can have 1 or 2 collaborators or correspondents conducting the organization's activities on that territory. Interestingly, this organization, FECRIS, is politically, philosophically, and religiously neutral. I will return to this conflict of interest about religious neutrality. What is important is that these two branches, although they present themselves as 2 separate entities, have the same individuals in their leadership. It's significant that on Wikipedia, we find that the current president of the Russian organization has been the vice president of the French, or rather pan-European organization since 2009. And the vice president of the Russian organization is a correspondent for the French one. Remember how I said the French organization is secular, and the vice president of the French organization is a correspondent, and the vice president of the Russian organization is a priest. So this whole thing appears...
What independence can we talk about here?
What independence can we talk about here? Additionally, it is important to know that these 2 organizations, since they have the same people in leadership, it is evident that they coordinate their activities. Knowing that in 2022 a conflict arose between Russia and Ukraine, and the whole of Europe stood up to defend Ukraine, the French branch, being pan-European, stood in defense of Ukraine. While the vice president of the French organization, who is also the president of the Russian branch, sided with Russia and its administration.
It is interesting to sit on 2 chairs during a geopolitical conflict, having someone who is vice president here and president there, and still the same person. What's more interesting is that this separation on paper only occurred in 2023.
The question is whether on paper really, because there is no press release anywhere indicating that RACIRS left FECRIS.
And in 2024, when...
In 2024, the vice president of the Russian branch made an appearance in Novosibirsk, where the Russian organization had a large logo of the French pan-European organization behind them. So, we see the conflict of interest and whether it is not just that the French organization...
We can speculate. Big questions arise about what it is and what it means.
Yes, big questions arise. Who is over whom and who controls these 2 organizations?
Who actually controls these?
If we dig deeper, we see that this president of Rossirs, the Russian organization, introduced the term totalitarian sect in 1993, which started the labeling and stigmatization. Additionally, I found a video of him proudly boasting that he won 5 court cases, creating a quasi-precedent that anyone who feels like it can label any group as a cult without any prosecution. It means that one day you decide without any evidence to label, and that person cannot defend themselves. And when we go further and return to the terrible example we had with Falun Gong, when we got to this information, it boggled our minds. Since we found out that in 2001, a Chinese official came to Russia. Sorry, I will not call him by name. I'm not good with Chinese names. But in essence, he came to Russia for an anti-cult conference organized by the Rossirs president. Based on this conference, it was understood that if China wanted to repress a group, the simplest way was to label it a cult. Because then dehumanization happens, and to public mitigation, that such harsh measures against the group became justified and legitimate for security interests.
To get the public to accept it, to name it, the point was to gain public support as well.
Justification in front of the public.
We know from Third Reich that these practices work. It's our history full of evidence that to eliminate a group, they have to be dehumanized effectively. And this was in 2001.
And by then, Falun Gong had already been hunted for 2 years.
Yes, because in 1999, it was reported that Falun Gong had 70 million followers, a huge number. From this perspective, when we look at organ harvesting, we have a large group of people to take organs from. Let's continue. In 2008, the Rossirs president came to China, and during his trip, he's talking about the anti-cult movements. He supports all of this rhetoric, and based on his visits to China, it is evident that after his visits in the media,
Information is appearing.
Information appearing more and more.
and they support these views, and at the same time, what is shown is rising
The transplantation business in China. Yes, because basically we saw somewhere that he expressed himself and praised how the Republic of China is proceeding against the repression of this group.
While we are still talking about the sect and the cult that you mentioned, I think it is very important to say that the vice president of Rossirs, I will call him an ideologue, did such an interview on television, where the editor asked him, in my opinion, an absolutely normal question. How is an ordinary person, that granny, that grandpa in a village, how is he supposed to know that where he goes to church or that place, whether it is a sect or not? And I'll read it so that it sounds real, so that we don't make any confusions. He directly said that as soon as some organization, even if it calls itself the Orthodox Church, stands against the official position of the Moscow Patriarch, and here the editor actually asked if this is the signal, and the vice president of Rossirs answers him, yes, that is already the emergence of a kind of guruistic form in an individual parish. This means that the priest overshadows God. Now imagine who he compares the Patriarch of Moscow to, the vice president of Rossirs. compares the Moscow Patriarch to God. What is happening? After all, he is actually starting to spread the word that Orthodoxy is the only true faith. I mean, that is propaganda of Nazism.
But only under the Moscow Patriarchate. Now, if we take
That bar specifically.
when we put it a little into the numbers, if we consider that there are, I think, 2.6 billion people who follow Christians in the world, it is the most widespread religion. As for the Orthodox churches, we have some 200 million followers there, and within the Russian Orthodox, the Moscow Patriarchate, that's half there. There are some 112 million of them, and he still says from these 112 million, on the basis of what is happening, that there are only a few true believers within that.
He literally said
And
that.
everyone else is a cult.
He said even if some part of Orthodoxy separates itself, it is already a sect. So the sect is Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. But I still want to say one more thing about this, about the vice president of Rosters. He's also known for having very, very negative statements about the Ukrainians. He called them cannibals. And even, I'll read that too. He even said that cannibals. He said this about Ukrainians. It's useless to put cannibals in cages, because if you keep them there for life, they'll still be cannibals, and that's why they have to be destroyed. And that's what an Orthodox priest said.
This was said by an Orthodox priest.
Vice President of Rosters, an organization that appears to be anti-cult.
Where is the love for God, love for neighbor? Where are those values?
But we should clarify here, we are not against the Orthodox Church. There are many believers and priests in the Orthodox Church who truly love God and do pastoral work for their followers. We must point out that within the Orthodox Church, a group came to power.
A narrow group.
It's a narrow group that came to power, and we will further reveal how it is possible that such a narrow group in the church, which has such sick, for us completely sick views, Egon Shalakian revealed to us that the president of the Russian branch, Rasiers, is a mentally ill person, which is already publicly known. It is verifiable information. It is not that we denigrate him. Furthermore, we combine the facts that Fekris and Rasiers are actually connected. We found out a lot of organizations, as well as the UN. A lot of letters were written to cancel these inhumane organizations. And these organizations, despite the fact that there is a mentally ill person in the leadership, that they act against the people, label people, that all others who are outside their territory are sectarians. So they still have their power, and the whole world still does not know what to do with order by them. And I will just ask, and actually you said that everyone else is a sect. We in Slovakia are Christians, and according to him, we are also a sect.
Because we're not Orthodox.
Because we are not Orthodox. He literally said it there. He did not just say that they are the followers of Jesus, or all those denominations that have separated from the teachings of Jesus. He straightaway said that the only correct,
Who disagrees with the opinion of the Moscow Patriarch.
the Patriarch of Moscow, who he actually declared to be God.
But I was completely shocked when I saw those videos of experts one after the other. These are academics from various fields, from all over the world, who say that the Russia's president is an absolutely incompetent person. He has no education at all and no authority to comment on these matters.
I even read that no one respects him in his industry.
But when we look at these anti-cult movements and people who are connected in some way through the anti-cult, Even if we don't find them on the factory's website, just look and open their diploma's thesis, their dissertations, and see who they cite. And here too we find people who quote the president of Russia's ideologues.
This president, so that people don't think that we are still moving, that it doesn't concern us. We mentioned that we are a democratic country, but we have a French organization here, FECRIS, which actually operates and is an extended arm of Russia, which has all these sick narratives and brings sick opinions into society. And even we here in Slovakia are no exception, and not affected by this Russian organization, because the president of the Russian organization received a doctorate at an unnamed university in Slovakia.
But there are also stigmas created here. Recently, a manual appeared on the website of a Slovak organization which says, "How do you recognize a sect?" This is similar to the editor's question. And actually, there is some procedure explained there. And for me, for some strange reason, under the whole manual, which has the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic, there are only tags without words, without any explanation. And among the tags, there's Alatra and Creative Society. Isn't this bringing in the narratives of anti-cult organizations? How is it possible to arbitrarily put a tag on us, on a manual that tells us how to avoid, I don't know the exact name, but it's about how to avoid a sect, how to enter it, how it can influence you. And there are the tags Alatra and Creative Society.
We could ask them, it is under the head of the ministry.
Does the ministry even know about it?
Does our minister even know about this? What she is actually covering up, because it is under her head. Everything that happens in society, that under her head the stigmatization of society is happening. Under her head, the society is being divided.
Yellow stars are given to organizations.
It is possible that basically it is happening outside.
And where can it lead? It can lead to genocide. And it is at this point that I ask myself the question. I just remember when we discussed the Second World War at school, there was always such a misunderstanding on this topic. How could people allow concentration camps at that time? How could people at that time support such an atmosphere in the country and look away and do nothing about it? How is it possible? And I ask, are we living in a different time than it was then? After all, it is happening right in front of our eyes.
The same.
Extermination of some population group, and we're talking about huge numbers. And in such a simple way that some organization will decide, we'll call this group of people a sect, we'll call it a cult, and move on. It's going to be extremist sect, and we ban it, and then we dehumanize them and start harvesting their organs alive. And this is a society that seems normal to us?
And everything under the guise.
But we are silent because we don't know about it.
But we not only remain silent, we actually do not see. Because I have also encountered situations where I look at a certain group of people and think that they are a sect. And it seemed natural to me. I grew up with that. My parents warned me, be careful with this group. It's a sect. Oh, what does that mean? Well, you can have problems. Oh, okay. My parents warned me because public opinion is already shaped in a certain way. We all fell into it. We all succumbed to the enormous manipulation of a mentally ill person.
And that's why we said at the beginning, dear Slovaks, are you aware of whether you have also fallen into the manipulation of the anti-cult organizations? Have you also adopted their narratives? Because that is exactly what, as we said, is happening. It is given and we accept it as a fact. We do not ask what is behind it, who investigated it, who had the right to decide that an organization is or is not a sect. Who can do that? And what? No one monitors what their purpose is and why they are actually doing it.
And to top it all off, in December 2022, specifically on December the 12th, in the Kremlin, the Order of Alexander Nevsky was awarded to the Vice President of Rasiers. We are talking about the already mentioned Orthodox priest.
The one who called Moscow Patriarch
Is the
God.
Russian organization?
Yes, among other things, we found statements where he claims that the Allatra movement should be labeled as an extremist organization. This is that person. Essentially, the fact that he is being awarded such an honor is always accompanied by symbolic ceremonies, where it is very telling who is presenting the award. And I would like to say that this vice president was awarded the Order of Alexander Nevsky. We can probably also say that it was for supporting the Russian special military operation in Ukraine and for anti-cult activities. And it was handed over by the first deputy director of the office of the Russian president on behalf of the Russian president. And this person is very interesting because when we looked further, he is a person who performs various acts on behalf of the president without his knowledge. And here we begin to get to interesting questions about who actually runs things, how they run things, whether the president is even aware of what is happening and how it is happening in his country. I'm not saying he doesn't bear responsibility. He does bear responsibility. He cannot avoid this. But when we look at 2018, when the president found out that Jehovah's Witnesses were banned in the Russian Federation, he commented on it and said that he disagrees, that religious freedom should be maintained within the Russian Federation, that they will look into it and that it will be addressed somehow, that it should be investigated. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses, as you mentioned, had hope that they would finally find relief, that things would improve,
That the imprisoned would be released.
that the stigmatization would finally end after all they had suffered. They never got to an investigation,
And it continued.
and the repressions continue.
And grew. How's that possible?
So, either the president does not have the authority he should have, or someone else is running the country. And these are interesting questions and inquiries.
Seriously though, all of it, all of what we talk about is publicly accessible. You can find it all. And when doubts arise, we recommend looking into it, because facts confirm it.
So, based on what we have detailed so far, we can say that what the anti-cult organizations are doing falls under genocide, crimes against humanity, terrorism, and treason.
We mentioned only a few things. This is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yes, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And we must say that all these anti-cult organizations and all those who do this will be held accountable. If we summarize what falls under genocide, on the Wikipedia pages, we find that genocide is a form of mass violence defined by the UN as crimes committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, any national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. If we recall what is happening with Falun Gong in China, this group completely falls under genocide. It is a clear genocide, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily and mental harm to the group members, implementing measures to prevent births within this group. It also includes transfer to camps.
Transfer of children.
Transfer of children to camps and transfer of people to camps, and deliberately creating living conditions intended to completely or partially destroy this group.
And it is very interesting that many researchers say that, in a sense, the final phase before the next phase is the denial of genocide. And it can be observed that when public statements denying genocide appear, it is a sign that genocide can very quickly appear in that area on a larger scale, or that it can begin to spread. This is closely related to terrorism, because many times in the world, we think of terrorism as when a bomb explodes somewhere or something happens. And in our consciousness, an image is created that this is the worst thing that happened at that moment. Of course, it is terrible. But the second step why anti-cults are spreading and through their narratives trying to influence other countries is that The second step is that it leads to disruption in that country. The country, society, but especially those countries begin to break down from within. The government starts to be questioned. We know that this has already happened in many countries. Narratives of violence, aggression start to be inserted. Style, sentiment begin to be supported, leading to manifestations, revolutions. Their goal is to completely destroy the country from within.
Destabilization of the government, distrust in the government.
And if we consider it, it's not about large groups of people. It's about a few individuals who stand behind the ideology of some anti-cult. There are a few journalists, a few politicians, some entities, but they do it with a clear goal to establish totalitarianism worldwide, to suppress the democratic system.
When you think about it, they always play on fear, on the emotion of fear. It is good to consider that if public opinion is well established that a sect is dangerous, then it is good to ask where this information is coming from. And it turns out that there are only three possible sources from which it comes. One is some religious representatives, authorities, and the media. These are the three streams from which it can come, based on which public opinion is formed. And now the question is, where is it coming from that they inform about these things? They inform based on what anti-cult organizations say. According to Chalakian, we know that there is another force above them, and they are just the medium through which this information flows to us.
Dr. Chalakian named it Hydra, well, just for our viewers to make the connection.
Well, when we look at it further, when it comes to inciting fear in people, I automatically fear for my safety, my life, my family. And if I am constantly attacked by the media with such reports, such information, when hatred is fueled in society, a person can very quickly fall into psychological problems. Even experts are starting to talk about a more sophisticated version of terrorism called psychoterrorism, because it is also something experienced by eyewitnesses. As we mentioned, if someone is a witness, as we had that policeman who watched a woman being cut out alive, her heart, kidneys, and I don't know what else, the point is, yes, a terrible act is happening here, but the even more significant consequence happens in the person afterward, inside them. The more violent, aggressive, and the worse the experience, the more the psyche breaks. We humans are not built to watch wars, to see people being killed, to see them being harmed. And here, a break in the psyche occurs. When we look at how the number of mental illnesses in society has increased in recent years, we found information that, according to the OECD, the incidence of mental problems was about 1 in 6 people 5 years ago. And at the end of 2023, it is already every second person diagnosed with some mental problem.
This is over 5 years, and increasingly younger age groups are affected by these psychological and mental disorders, and currently it also includes children.
When we start looking at it from this perspective, that every such article, every journalist who supports this kind of information spreading, and especially when we now see that many times the information is false, unverified, based on a few sick individuals who decide to label a group, and this spreads in society, just see where we have come. Today we can basically label anyone as a sect, so that one would be afraid to go out. How far do we need to go?
I can say that there is evidence that the number of people affected by these anti-cult organizations and their members is higher than during the First and Second World Wars. And what is important, we always say, which you nicely said before, what are the 3 ways it has to get into a person that someone is a sect? Who fills these 3 channels? These are the anti-cult organizations, and someone stands behind them. We have said this many times, but we repeat it again, that the activity of these anti-cult organizations, we didn't really notice it until it affected us. But when you look at it closely, when you start reading all the internet sources, it is evident. And it is evident how many people, how many heads, how many capacities, how many state representatives, speak out against this activity, and these people cannot achieve the abolition of those organizations.
Because they're given space. That is also very interesting.
I would like to add to this, because every time you speak, I feel the need to emphasize that it is not the countries who are behind this. It is few individuals who are doing all of this. It is very important for our viewers to realize this. All this is done by only a few people.
That's why they will be accused of treason, because they operate against their own homeland, against their own country, against their fellow citizens. This is committing crimes against humanity.
And behind them stands that dark force, which Egon Shalakian named in his video, which operates mainly from Russian territory. But exactly as you said, they also operate against their own country. So they will be tried for treason, because their goal is to dismantle not only us, America, China, and other countries, but also Russia. That's essentially terrorism. When we continue, in the video with Egon Shalakian, we learn that all these crimes we mentioned will be punished, because these crimes are not subject to a statute of limitations. And as we also understood, they will be investigated, and we don't know how long this investigation will take. But it will continue until it is completely finished, and it will be decided by the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
It is important to note that we're not here to point fingers and say, you are guilty, you are guilty. The main interest is to stop these injustices in our world, so that every person has the right to a normal, safe life, development, a space where they can raise their children. As mothers, we feel that the society we live in is divided. Many times, you can't let children go outside alone because you don't know who they will meet and who should we actually fear. We're even afraid of our neighbors, how divided we are.
We do not realize who is behind all this, who brings this uncertainty, this fear into society. Many people do not want to have children. Society is not developing in a healthy direction at all.
And that is why it is important to realize that every journalist, everyone who takes these pieces of information and spreads them into the public is forming public opinion. And also us, if we accept this public opinion as our own view. We say, I have critical thinking. No one dictates to me what to think. I think these things myself, right? In the end, it leads to hidden manipulation. What do I think? What is my political opinion? We can hardly sit with friends in a restaurant anymore. We won't talk about politics because it represents a topic that divides. Two best friends can argue. This is about sowing purely hateful feelings among citizens. And when this escalates further, it can lead to civil unrest. And when we talked today about how Jehovah's Witnesses are treated, how Falun Gong is treated, that is the problem.
Yes, sure. We are not speaking for... Yes, primarily, we found out about it because we are members of the Ultra International Public Movement. But now we are not only speaking for the participants of the Ultra International Public Movement, who have already been labeled as a sect and a cult. We want to speak up for all organizations, as we talked about today, also for Jehovah's Witnesses and Falun Gong. But there are many organizations, associations, and even business organizations, entrepreneurial entities in the world, and in Slovakia that have already been labeled this way.
Well, Herbalife, Amway, just to give an example.
Herbalife, Avon, Amway. For me, it was also completely new how a business entity gets labeled as a sect. And that is why we would like to invite all these affected entities, people, associations, everyone to contact us at sk@alatra.tv. Did I say it correctly? Yes, please write to us. We intend to organize such roundtables. We intend to connect because only when we combine our common forces and when we speak out loud about what's happening to us, what happened to you, what happened to us. And thanks to Egon Shalakian and all the information he shared in the video, we now have a unique opportunity to stop the activities of these anti-cult inhuman societies, associations. Basically, we can say that they are sects. And we can do it once and for all. And we can do it only if we unite.
I just wanted to add that we don't just think. We already, and after today's roundtable, we already know that many have been chased by anti-cults. So really, please, contact us. Let us jointly voice it. Let us show the world together what is happening here, so that together we can do something about it.
It is a direct threat to democracy. If there's any misunderstanding that this is happening in Russia, that this is happening in China, no. The problem is, Egon Shalakin also told us this. He pointed out Slovakia, because Slovakia is supposed to be the bridge through which this hydra can pass into democratic countries. That means we are now talking about the direct danger for us.
If you consider it, the hydra is already here. If we look at what comes out in the media, everything we talked about today, all the signs, the narratives in the media, they're there. The hydra is already here walking across the bridge.
Today we tried to show where it can lead if we remain silent, if we remain passively sitting and watching. Well, it doesn't concern me, but it concerns all of us.
Yes, and we know that such roundtables or calls for organizations will also happen in other countries. We are not the only ones doing it here in Slovakia, but it will happen all over the world, and we now have a chance to raise this wave and stand against it.
Regarding this, Katka, exactly what you're saying, I would like to add that when we searched, there is such a resolution. I would really feel out. In February this year, the information is 2 months old, a resolution was passed in the US Senate on a bill aimed at fighting these inhumane anti-cults. It is Resolution 569. It recognizes religious freedom as a fundamental right. It expresses support for international religious freedom as a cornerstone of United States foreign policy, and expresses concern over increased threats and attacks on religious freedom around the world. So, the wave of resistance, voicing what anti-cults are doing and standing up to them, is already coming from the countries.
This is very important because if we look at it, we can say that religion and politics are the two topics that tend to polarize society the most and also influence it. And public opinion is very easily manipulated through these two topics. As we said, even in Slovakia, we are a society significantly divided. Shalakin talked to us about how America is being divided, how it is leading to civil war. When we look at Slovakia, the polarization is very clear both before and after elections. Always, very much constantly, to the point that I don't know if a person should be afraid to have their own opinion, to freely decide for this or that political party, because
No matter who you choose, I will say publicly, you will always get the hit.
and the conditions are currently set so that no matter who is in the government, what happens in the media, the stirring, the division within the public continues the same way. It just keeps intensifying. Now, let's let our imagination run a little. Where can this lead? Because I have heard various opinions that we should leave the EU, the UN is not fulfilling its function. Some people start to express that NATO is an institution that we don't need. And I say, okay, let's look at it. Let's break down these institutions because they do not fulfill what they are supposed to. So who will be left? Anti-cult movements that will lead us? Where? Will they cut us alive?
A few individuals will lead us somewhere.
Organ transplantation?
A few sick individuals.
Us and our children? Is that it? Because as we heard, if we are not followers of the Orthodox Church,
No, the Moscow Patriarch.
even if we do not recognize the Moscow Patriarch, we are essentially sectarians? Is this where we are going? Then it starts, I don't know, if we don't want this, then it leads to some anarchy, and voices will begin to say that we need a leader and a firm hand to guide us. And I don't know if you noticed, but a video is starting to spread subtly on social networks, very funny and humorous, which shows how great Kim Jong-un is.
That's the leader of North Korea.
The leader of North Korea. It is done very subtly. You watch it, you laugh. What a nonsense. But just by watching it, a person already accepts some image into their subconscious that it is actually good. What is wrong with that? It does not show how people in North Korea suffer, how human rights are suppressed there. So we want to get there? Do we want to turn Slovakia into northern Slovakia?
Both to the one.
We let our imagination run wild here. So let's go back. We have institutions that had ideas.
At the beginning, they were created to unite people, like the European Union, the United States, not just the exchange of people, free exchange, but the exchange as an economic union. At the beginning, the idea, the UN, the Union of States, equal states, the ideals are there at the beginning. They are beautiful, they can unite us. We can say we are not naive. We know that the European Union has huge problems, and that many now call it, we have heard it being called more of a military union. We understand that the UN also has huge problems as an institution. But we can return somewhere to the beginning and bring these values back.
Transform it. But that is also the point in our project. We are not saying that we should destroy. We should not destroy. We should build something functional or transform that way is. And the dysfunctional will fall away by itself. We're definitely not talking about cancelling the European Union. Yes, we can transform it, but there must be a force that connects multiple countries because it is definitely a better way than to be ruled by 2 or 3 people.
But that is the overall idea. Again, we turn to what is the essence of Allatra. We point out the problem of climate. This is not a problem of one nation, one group with a certain faith. This is a problem of us as an entire planet, us as humanity, and we call for unity. We need to create a unified scientific center that will address climate issues. These are the goals we need to work on now. It is not time to divide, it is time to unite and find solutions so that we can manage as humanity.
And when we return to the beginning, that we were accused that Allatra is no longer what it was, that it stood under a different flag and preaches different values. So we return again. Allatra is still the same as it was. And we, as mothers and participants of the Allatra International Public Movement, know what our biggest problem is right now. We must, of course, address it because it destroys our existence. It destroys our lives. But our biggest problem, which we realize, why we are here and why we are trying to unite people, is to create a scientific center, to unite people around the world. Allatra is beyond religion. It is not a religious organization. These organizations, these anti-cults are trying to draw us into the realm of religious organizations, which we are not. It was interesting that we did not mention that it was precisely from these anti-cults that the label on Allatra came, that basically...
That was said by, when I talked about the vice president of Reuters, the journalist there asked him who he thinks are sect, and he said that their common goal is money and power. And do we have an interest? I mean, are we collecting some power and money?
Exactly. They labeled us as a sect, but nowhere in Allatra does anyone. We are equal volunteers from all countries. We profess all religions, everyone their own. No one left their religion. Everyone stayed in their religion, maybe even deepened their connection and understanding. And we are not about power, we are not about money. But we are truly about life, about survival. And unfortunately we stigmatized.
We want to ensure that such crimes against humanity, genocide, terrorism, treason, do not happen. So what is happening in the field of anti-cult movements and the consequences of their actions never happens again.
So that it stops.
And Egon Chalakian suggested that a joint organization, a kind of shield, could be formed, made up of volunteers who would oversee this. But that is for the future. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yes, so that something like this never happens again. So that no one can use their power over others. Dear viewers, if you have stayed with us until now, thank you very much. If you need to grasp some topics even more, it is definitely possible if you watch the video with Egon Shalakian and also the first roundtable, which was broadcasted on Allatra TV and on the Creative Society platform, where this topic is uncovered even more. We try to uncover precisely those anti-cult organizations even more. As for Slovakia, we can say, when we already mentioned who is behind everything, who divides society, who manipulates, who stigmatizes society, who labels, and how we people accepted those labels. How without any hesitation, simply, when someone says the Jehovah's Witnesses are a sect, we take it as a fact. We ask you to always stop and at least think about who gave this label, on what basis they gave it, and who benefits from it. And try to think about how it threatens, devalues, and destroys the lives of those people who receive the label. And when we look at this as just the beginning and where it can lead, because the genocide in the Falun Gong community has already happened. Another thing we would like to say is that Slovakia is a Christian country, and the tentacles of this dark organization also reached Slovakia through anti-cults. And when we heard what came out of the sick mind of the vice president of the anti-cult organization, which is in Russia, which we do not say is Russia, its goal is also the dismantling of Russia. But from his sick mind, it came out that everyone, except the Moscow Patriarch, is a sect. So he labeled all of us. So if we asked you at the beginning, if you really think you are outside of this whole topic, that it does not concern you, you have your beautiful, peaceful life, and nothing is happening here. Try to think about it after everything you have heard, whether it is really so. We are free mothers. We cannot remain silent because it concerns not only our lives, but also our children's lives. And our only real effort is to draw attention to climate change so that we have a chance to survive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.